Greetings, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar series on shaping the post-pandemic world. My name is Preet Olak, and I'm the Associate Dean of Research at Schulich, and I'll be hosting the webinar and moderating the Q&A session. So here's a quick agenda for today's webinar. We'll start with some introductions. This will be followed by the formal presentation from a speaker. After that, we'll take your questions. So please submit your questions anytime during the presentation or during the Q&A session. We will end with some concluding remarks. It gives me great pleasure in introducing today's speaker, Professor Don Thompson. Professor Thompson is an economist and emeritus professor in the Schulich School of Business. He has taught previously at Harvard Business School and the London School of Economics. He's the author of 12 books, including the best-selling the $12 million Stuffed Shark, The Curious Economics of Contemporary Art, and his most recent work on the art world, the Orange Balloon Dogs, Bubbles, Turmoil, and Avarice in the Contemporary Art Market. His past and continuing interest in the markets for high art makes him the most suitable person to share his thoughts on today's topic about luxury fashion in the time of COVID. So welcome, Professor Thompson, and it's all yours.
Well, good afternoon to everybody, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where you are. This is about the high end of the fashion industry, but it's a mini look at what has happened with Corona-19. Production facilities have closed, retail inventories have piled up, retailers have closed, and consumers' preferences and habits are changed. We're looking at a world which will be very different when we come out of this than it was before. Now, luxury fashion is a particular case study here. This is an industry, luxury end and the premium end, that has relied on storytelling, status, and the aura of the fashions. It has been under great pressure from millennials, and I'll more about that later. And all of a sudden, it hit a tipping point. Disaster struck with a shutdown in March. So let me tell you something first about luxury fashion, and then what's happening to it. Treat this as a case study. Think of this as a case study in your last semester of your MBA, and at the end, you're going to be asked, what will they do? So, now what is this? Well, it's a handbag. It's a $5,000 handbag. This is how I got interested in luxury fashion. I was walking along Bloor Street in Toronto on Mink Mile, and in the Louis Vuitton window, I saw this handbag. Now, what is this? Well, it's a Louis Vuitton handbag. It's got a picture of the Mona Lisa. It's got the name of the artist in big block letters, but it's co-authored with Jeff Koons, who is a major contemporary artist. Now, in the lower right-hand side, you'll see his initials, and you'll see his signature balloon rabbit hanging from it. Now, and Louis Vuitton's symbols superimposed on the Mona Lisa. This is what happens when luxury fashion meets millennials. This is the launch dinner for the handbag and the master series of which it was part, held at the Louvre in Paris. Now, this is the most expensive evening venue in Paris and probably in France. There were 100 guests, and this was just to launch the handbag. Now, this is a great venue because you can take a selfie with the Mona Lisa with no one else around. There were 10 paid celebrity guests, each of whom received a six-figure appearance fee, plus their transportation, plus their outfits, plus their accommodation. You see two of them here. Now, this was held just for the publicity, and the only place it got a full write-up was in Vanity Fair. It got a full page in Vanity Fair. This picture's from that write-up. It is almost certain that the sales of the purse, which went on for 7 months, around, primarily North America and Europe, did not pay for the opening dinner. That doesn't matter. That is not what luxury is about. Think of luxury as falling into four categories: luxury, premium, accessible, and fast fashion. You're probably more familiar with the last two. We will talk just about the first two because they blend together and they're going in different directions. I love this first quote. Luxury is the ordinary of extraordinary people, the extraordinary of ordinary people. The luxury industry uses this. They actually say it. Now, luxury goods, the other good definition is that luxury goods are the only area which it's possible to make luxury profit margins. As a rough approximation of what I mean, take an Hermes purse. A luxury purse sells for about 12 times its production cost. A premium handbag for about 8 times, and below that for 3 times cost. So you're talking about, think of these, what have I listed? 1, 2, 3, 6, 8 firms. There are about 15 luxury firms, but which are luxury and which are premium depend on who you ask, and no one will give you the same list. These are 8 indicative of what I'm talking about, and I think everybody would agree with these. Now, the luxury segment is going to survive the pandemic because they are, for the most part, either part of very wealthy conglomerates with deep pockets, or they are very large organizations which have access to capital. This is an interesting comparison. This comes from a friend of mine named Miriam Verardi, who makes the observation that luxury, fashion, art, and religion have many similarities. Aesthetics and contemplation, the importance of the label, timelessness, a creator, an urban cathedral, a star designer, to represent the label. And luxury is in the spectaculars. This is a runway show. Chanel puts on 2 major couture shows a year in 4 cities. This one in Paris costs somewhere between $20 and $25 million to put on. 70 models. Half of those outfits will never be offered in a boutique. They're there to attract attention, and of course you can custom order them, but they will not be sold thereafter. 5 of them are there for the press, only for the press. They're the really outlandish ones that you see that appear in the Toronto Star the next day, and they're only there to be photographed. They're not there to be sold. About 15% of these are intended for a Middle East audience and are sold nowhere else. About 15% of them are intended for a mistress market, and that's what they call it. They're outfits that a man would not buy for his wife or his daughter, but would buy for his mistress. And people in the boutiques will tell you that when a man walks in, they can tell right away by what he looks at whether he's shopping for a mistress or shopping for a spouse. Now, this is what luxury houses do or have done before the pandemic. They will probably continue trying to do these things, but you get a sense of how out of touch this is with the millennial generation. Again, this is a phrase they use. They advertise so the few who can acquire a label are aware of having what others cannot possess. This is why you see Louis Vuitton advertising in the Toronto Star. That's not where their audience is, but that's to remind customers what they can have and others can't have. Luxury houses never mention product attributes. They imply history. They imply a perceived scarcity. Not premium brands, just luxury brands. They emphasize a disconnect between cost and function. They never go on sale, and they're generally not sold on the internet. Sometimes accessories, certainly cosmetics, but not luxury fashion garments. Now, I mentioned accessible fashion and fast fashion. Accessible fashion is important only because it overlaps with premium. And it pressures them because it does go on sale, it does sell on the internet, and it overlaps in stores like Macy's in the US. And so the two are compared to the benefit of accessible fashion and not premium. Now, another example of what luxury houses do. Some of you are aware of the Met Ball, which is held in the Metropolitan Museum, the first Monday in May each year. This is the most expensive evening out in the world. It also raises more money for the Met than any other charity event in the United States. A ticket to the Met Ball is $35,000 for each person. There are very few comps. So 2 people attend this with an outfit for the female, if a female is part of the pair, which costs as much, and you have a $100,000 evening easily. Now look at some of the outfits. A table for 10, and I should tell you that 550 people attend. There are 500 people on a waiting list who will never get to attend. You can apply and get on a waiting list, but you will never rise to the top. People are invited to attend. Attendees are curated by Anna Wintour of Vogue. That means that even if you buy a table of 10, she gets to determine who comes and who doesn't come. Not the buyer, she does. Why? Because attending this gets her seal of approval that you are in the social elite. This is my favorite picture from the Met Ball. This is Rihanna. Look at the outfit. Look at the photographers. To attend as a photographer, you must wear a formal evening dress to be allowed to stand in the stairs and photograph the attendees as they walk up the red carpet of the Metropolitan Museum in New York. Now look at Rihanna on the right, a front view of the costume, and note what's interesting about it. There are no sleeves, there are no armholes. This is a wraparound gown. Once inside, to sit down and have a drink, or need to stand up and have a drink, she has to change outfits to let her arms loose. I couldn't resist including these. This is Cher from 1974, Kim Kardashian from a couple of years ago, and Kim Kardashian said she copied Cher's outfit. The interesting thing about these is they are totally transparent except for some beading. And when I say totally transparent, I don't mean only the vital parts are covered. I mean, they're totally transparent, which is why you only see pictures of Kim Kardashian in this dress from the back. Now, in a luxury event, it's okay to dress like this. You're not turned away, you're photographed and admired. The second and most interesting category of luxury fashion is premium. I listed here 10 labels, which you may or may not be familiar. There are about 700 premium labels. And the interesting part of this is that the labels as a whole, the 700 as a whole, lose money every year and have for a decade. About 15% go bankrupt every year and are replaced by new graduates from fashion programs. Some are sold through their own boutiques. Most are sold through their own boutiques and multi-brand independent retailers and department stores. And they are the ones that will suffer dramatically from the pandemic. Easily 15% of these will never reopen when the pandemic is over, and it might be 10%. Now, both of these, indeed the whole fashion industry, is faced with a challenge, was originally before the pandemic, faced with the challenge of millennials. Roughly the 15 years born after 1981. In 2015, they became the largest spending bloc in the United States and China, and I assume in Canada, although I haven't seen any figures. Today, they are about 60% of the spending bloc for fashion. Now, the typical definition of a millennial is the one I've included below. Condo dwellers trapezing through Whole Foods, and it ends with spending their money on Schulich admission consultants for their children. Now, the original American version of this talked about Ivy League admission consultants for their children, but didn't suggest that I change it. Now, what happens when luxury fashion meets millennials? Well, a tipping point happens. Millennials, for the most part, view runway shows, print advertising, seasonal collections, elegant brand flagship stores, high markup department stores as being either uncool or just irrelevant. They seek newer brands, streetwear labels, and they find them on the internet. Their fashion inspiration comes online, primarily from Instagram, and many buy streetwear and for status acquire Instagrammable experiences. Now, what do fashion houses do about that? And then the pandemic came along, and it accelerated this trend away from what fashion has traditionally been. Boutiques closed for 10 plus weeks, but more important, no events to dress for. You buy fashion for an event, no events. When the pandemic came along in mid-March, about a third of the spring, summer fashions were in stores, about a third of them were in warehouses en route, and about a third of them were still with manufacturers. Everything shut down. So what happened? Immediately, discounting online became rampant. Neiman Marcus in the US, which, as you may know, has recently got into receivership, which had never discounted high fashion or luxury fashion or premium fashion before, started offering 30% off, then 40% off, then 70% off. Warehouses started shipping, because stores were shut down, started shipping to third-party gray market sellers who discounted. All sorts of things appeared online that had never been online before. All at discount. Runway shows are canceled, less glamour, less mystique, and Amazon has now set up a premium fashion platform. And a lot of people believe that once you sell on Amazon, you are by definition not premium fashion. So how that works out remains to be seen. Retail is under stress. Fashion department stores in receivership or closing, Neiman Marcus, Lord & Taylor, Saks, Macy's, which I include because it is part high end and part lower, but Macy's announced a couple of days ago it's closing 50 department stores. 50 stores the size of the Bay in Toronto. All of those are outlets that fashion loses. One fashion boutique, probably in 3 of the list I gave you earlier, will not reopen. The multi-brand fashion independents that you find on every second block in Toronto, which support new labels, a third of those or more will not reopen. So what are strategic options? Luxury and premium is moving closer to being like accessible. Do they accept online sales or do they resist? When there was luxury discounting in 2008, it took 8 or 9 years to get rid of it because customers simply knew things were going on sale at the end of the season and waited. Do you accept online sales? Do you hope that millennials will mature and be like their parents? Well, I leave those with you as questions. Here's another option. I love this. Search for new ways to profit. This is a face mask made of pearls. There's a matching choker. Now, how much virus pearls filter out, I suspect is not much, but it's a fashion item. And for about $550, it's yours from Christian Siriano. And that's my presentation. Preet, back to you.
Thanks for that great presentation. So we have a few questions. So let me start with, I think, one from Diksha Goyal. And her question is related to your earlier part of your talk, which was that how important it is for the shows for this luxury market. So the question is, due to COVID, they had to cancel a lot of these fashion events. How will these decisions impact designers and other stakeholders in the near future?
It's a good question. It's the fashion industry is debating very much whether runway shows will come back in their old form. And there are hundreds of them, because a lot of premium brands hold their own less elaborate runway shows, or whether they'll take place online. There's much to be said for taking place online, but you lose the aura, you lose the mystique, but you do it for a third the price. And whether there are going to be 4 fashion seasons or 2 fashion seasons, or just one major runway presentation each year by luxury houses to establish their status. Okay.
Then there's another question related to your point about Amazon. So this is from Tan P. Ba. With Amazon introducing features such as Amazon Handmade, do you think Amazon has the future potential to house handmade, artsy, and premium brands?
Amazon is much more important than we realize. Interesting question. Who are the 3 major garment sellers, fashion outfit sellers in North America? Amazon's number 1. Macy's is number 2. And Walmart's number 3. Walmart has, not Walmart, but Amazon has 100 plus of its own brands, many of them simply copied off premium brands. Now, what happens to a lot of these premium retail, premium brands that fail is they move down in class or move down in market and sell on Amazon. Amazon has now, in the last 2 weeks, established a platform where brands can have their own setting, set their own prices. The problem with Amazon has been that it's intended to indicate warehouse decor, simple, low price. And so they're now establishing a fashion segment that will expand quickly.
Okay. So there are a couple of questions on this e-commerce retailer Sense, I guess that's how you pronounce it, with a double S-E-N-S-C. So the first question is from Shan Jessa. What are your thoughts on the e-commerce retailer Sense? Brands like Balenciaga are on and occasionally go on sale too. Does this take away from the luxury aspect of the brand?
Sense is about which I don't know very much. It's a very successful Montreal-based retailer, online retailer. They've been very successful. The general sense is that selling fashion outfits, not so much accessories, but fashion outfits online, reduces the aura and the reputation of the brand. But what has happened online is that more and more accessories are being sold online. Interestingly enough, fashion houses don't make any money on clothing, luxury houses. If they break even, that's considered fine. First of all, because of the advertising cost, but secondly, because very often only 20% of the production run for a particular fashion may sell. So there's a huge number of clothing items to get rid of at the end of a season.
So there's a related
they make money in accessories. So there's a temptation to sell more and more accessories online, but not clothing. Go ahead.
So there's a question from Joan Bradborough. Article this morning saying Gucci abandons worn-out ritual of fashion seasons as the industry looks inward. This is a comment, but you could comment on this.
Yes, Gucci has said they're abandoning two aspects. One is the regular four-season fashion events, but the other is interesting. The fashion shows are held months in advance of the season. Well, there's two interesting aspects. Fashion seasons, as clothes are sold around the world, are European fashions. We sell spring fashions at spring in Europe, even though we sell them in the Southern Hemisphere. China is now the second biggest market for fashions, but many of the other countries' seasons are different. But this is a European-focused idea. Now, not only was the idea to abandon the regular fashion shows, but it was to hold spring shows at the beginning of spring and not in November, and hold fall shows at the beginning of fall and not in the middle of spring, which happens now.
So the next question is related to some of, I think, the pictures, the excellent visuals you showed us. So what this is from Robin Freebans. The question is, the fashion industry is not a sustainable industry with a very high pollution, working conditions, and so on. To what extent do you foresee the pandemic providing an impetus for making change for the better and increasing market share by appealing to consumers by becoming champions of sustainability?
This fashion industry is considered the second major polluting industry in the world after fossil fuel. A huge proportion, for many brands, 40% of what they produce is not sold. Luxury brands, of course, can't discount it, although there are other ways of getting rid of it. But also, we have taught women in particular to change clothes every season. So the average life of a garment is often one wearing or a couple of wearings or a season. I forget what the figures are, 20,000 tons of discarded clothing a day around the world. Now, the hope was always that millennials would stick to those few fashion houses that tried to be environmentally correct. The problem is they charge much more because of what they have to do to make less polluting garments. Only 17% of respondents in a survey say that they will pay more for environmentally correct clothing. So until that changes, well, not much will happen.
So there's a question from Emily Martino. How will luxury brands continue their reputation of being for the upper class with more accessibility to other consumers by selling online? I guess the question is, how do they maintain their exclusivity by going online?
It's a good question. A large part of luxury is our luxury boutiques. Think of Hermes in downtown Toronto. Think of Louis Vuitton. Think of the experience in Chanel. And nobody's figured out how to reproduce that online. And so the more you sell online, the assumption is the less exclusive you get. Now, do you reach a different set of people? You're exposed, particularly for premium fashion, you're exposed to a much larger audience. So probably you sell at least some items to a much larger audience, but the reputation may suffer.
There's a question from Jack Van Beek. The question is, while the luxury sector faces its crisis, what opportunities are now out there other than Amazon and Walmart as retailers that recognize fundamental shifts in how we see clothing, what we expect of the industry and so on?
Well, the most interesting, and it hasn't come to Canada yet, but there is a rapidly expanding organization in the US called Rent the Runway. And they rent fashions. You pay a monthly fee, and depending on the fee you pay, you can have 3 or 5 fashion items at any given time. The idea is that your closet will be a virtual closet, and you'll rent almost everything you wear. You'll wear it once or twice and return it for about $140 a month US. Now, this is expanding rapidly. There are now 500,000 members in the US, although that's a guesstimate. That will expand both the market for premium fashion, not luxury, but premium, and expand the things that people have in their wardrobes. But other than that, I guess the answer is there are all sorts of multi-brand sellers online now that make buying, in many cases, premium outfits much easier.
There's a question from Meghna Asarpota. How do spending patterns on luxury goods differ between millennials and previous generations, such as the baby boomers?
Millennials and the Gen X, Gen Z that followed them are the major buying segments now for luxury goods. And they're buying a whole lot fewer. They are not replicating what their parents did. They're buying streetwear and spending on experiences.
So there's a question. This is a question actually which has been on my mind. So I thought I'll post that in. This is related to your comment about China, that China has become one of the second biggest market for luxury goods. But we also see that it's being getting into this whole trade fight, and we don't know how things will shape. So what are the implications of the trade conflict between the West and China on this particular market?
Well, China is the second largest fashion market, luxury fashion market in the world. And it will, in 3 or 4 years, become the largest. What has happened so far is that about 60% of the fashion purchases by Chinese are made outside of China. One of the reasons for that is that there's a luxury tax in China. It was 30%, it's now come down to about 15%. But a Louis Vuitton bag purchased in Paris has much more symbolic value than a Louis Vuitton bag purchased in Wuhan. So tourists shop for fashion, and you know that if you walked in any luxury fashion store in the West and seen the proportion of shoppers who are Asian. Asian shoppers prefer to shop in the West and bring back luxury for themselves and their friends. And as long as 60% plus of the sales to China to Asians take place in the West, the trade limitations may not have a great effect.
So there's a question from Shan Jessa. Which luxury brand do you feel has been a good example of moving into digital space, especially right now during COVID?
Well, the brands that will move more online are the premium brands, and some of them will benefit from it and some of them will fail because of it, and I have no idea which. In general, the Louis Vuittons of the world, the Hermes, the Chanels will sell their lower priced goods online, but will hold back the luxury goods because that's what makes them a luxury house.
So you mentioned in your talk about the Blue Street, whatever it's called, the Miracle Mile or whatever. So I noticed that walking past that some of those really luxury stores have opened. And I mean, they are as empty as even before they used to be. There used to be hardly one or two customers at one particular time. Do you think that people are willing to go back and do in-store shopping for luxury goods right now?
I don't know. It's not at all unusual to walk into this is Toronto's Mink Mile on Bloor Street, to walk into a store and find very few people. There's one high-end brand on Bloor Street. It says they have 70 customers, period. They have to have the store. You have to have the luxury flagship store. This is the temple. This is going back to the Merriam Variety's comparison of religion and fashion. You have to have the temple. You have to have the brand on Bloor Street. But they have a relatively small number of women that they serve. And anybody who wanders into the store is a bonus.
So this is a kind of an informational question from Yuting Chu. What are the best sources one can use to find information about luxury of the luxury goods market?
There is remarkably little. If you look on Amazon, there are a lot of texts about luxury fashion, but there are tell-all texts by former employees and former designers, and they'll give you a lot of background. But just in terms of a textbook on fashion, I don't know of any, because fashion faculties, the major ones in the world, don't use texts.
Thanks, Professor Thompson. So do you have any concluding thoughts? Because I think we are running out of time and running out of questions. There are a few questions, but I think we're more importantly running out of time. Any last thoughts?
The interesting aspect to this, and it's true of all sorts of businesses post coronavirus. How will they reposition? What will happen? And an exactly parallel industry to this is the high end of the contemporary art market. Dealerships are closed, auction houses are closed, art fairs are closed. What will contemporary art look like when they reopen? Well, it's the same question as with luxury. Will luxury and premium move closer to being like accessible? Will average prices come down? Will more be sold online? Will there be discounting? Stay tuned. I don't know.
Okay. With that, I think thanks, Professor Thompson, for this stimulating session, and thanks everyone who joined us today. So in closing, I want to kind of reiterate what Professor Joshi said earlier, that this was our last webinar of the current series. And personally, I will miss the Tuesday and Thursday ritual of the last couple of months. It was an honor to host such an exceptional set of thought leaders at Schulich, and I wish to give my thanks to Professor Joshi for giving me the opportunity to moderate these sessions. It was also heartening to see a large number of you joining us in the multiple sessions and the active engagement through questions and chats. The success of the series would not have been possible without your support and engagement, so thank you all. Lastly, I wish to express my sincere thanks to our technical host, Vito. Without his immense efforts in training all of us in using the technology and ensuring the functioning of the various moving parts, this webinar series would not have been delivered in such an efficient manner. So thanks, Vito. So as I say my goodbye for now until we meet again in the next phase of the webinar series, I invite you to stay engaged with Schulich through these various sites and social media platforms. So thanks again and goodbye till we meet again in thunder, lightning, or in rain, when the hurly-burly is done and when the battle is lost and won. So I've paraphrased Macbeth. So thanks everyone, and hope to see you again in a few weeks. Bye.